No. Hello everyone. We are about to create our second practice exercise for the ADT. So, as it was at the first demo exam, you can find the repository here. You can find everything related, and you can see that the exam sheet basically, so the exercises and so on are also can be found at the readme md file at the root of the repository. And again, I have it opened here at Visual Studio Code. So basically, this will be a little bit more complex exercise, but of course it can be even more crazier. But I think it reaches a good level where everything is mentioned and everything is created. Small things can occur, for example, using predicate delegates and other things, but basically these are only small things. The key or the biggest additional thing which we are doing here is that we are using double entities, so not just only one movie entity but two entities, and they have a relation between them, which relation is a one-to-many relation, to be precise. And basically we can start by checking what is the exercise. So again, we firstly have to create a database, which we will use a service-based database as it was previously. We will have user objects, and these user objects will have tweet objects. So basically it's a small Twitter application where there are users, and those users can have tweets, basically tweet objects. We can find the parameters of or properties of these entities here. We have some data annotation requests here, and basically we have to create the entities. After the service-based database, we have to create the entities, we have to create the DB context class for them, and we have to configure them in the on-model creating. So basically we can start doing so. And for that we will create a new project, which will be a console application, which will be named as user tweets underscore live, because this is for the recording. We again have to select .NET 5.0, and it will create us the program. Okay, I aligned everything here and I left the exercise opened here so we can check it. Okay, so firstly we have to create a service-based database. Again, what we have to do is right-clicking on the property on the project, add new item, and we will look for service-based database. That's it, and we have to name it as user tweets. Okay, it will add it. We again do the settings in the properties window. If it's not visible for you, you can right click on it and select properties. We will set content to copy always. We will do the same for the LDF. Select content and set copy always. The next step what we have to do is in the Server Explorer. If it's not visible for you, you can find it from the view menu, and in the user tweets MDF, right click on that, properties, and then select here the connection string, which is this long input. Double click inside, select it with Ctrl+C, copy it here, and that's not going to be what I need. So again, properties, sorry, this is the name, I wrongly copied it, so we need the connection string. Yeah, that's better. Okay, we have the connection string and we can close the connection. So coming here back and say close connection. And one additional thing I have to do, because your machine does not have SM user, so basically until from the MDF we come here and we place here data direct history, just like we did it previously. Okay, so basically we have the database, service-based database. Then we have to create the entity classes for that. We can use some kind of foldering, but for this exercise it's not really needed. If you would like to create, so you can do it, but for the moment it's fine like this. So I have to create classes here. So add new class, right click, add new class, and it will be a user entity. Again, I do the same, add class, and that will be the tweet entity. So both the user and both the tweet entity should be a public class, and I can copy here that the user has an int, auto incremented primary key. So for that I will write here public int ID. This will be used with the key attribute. For that I have to using the data annotations, and then I have to have a username, which is a string, public string user name get set, and I have to have a user email, public string user email. Technically in these cases, if we have the opportunity to create both the JSON file or XML file and the data or the entity class which we are creating right here, it's a better approach to use only name and email, but I did it like this, so it's just a small remark. Okay, I have the user, and the other thing which I have to do is the tweet. So in the tweet I have to create it to be public. In the tweet I will have a public int ID for sure, because that's something I would need as well. The string title should be named as string content. I should have a bool flagged and an int year. So public bool flagged. This can be named anyhow. It could be liked or something else. This is just some flag kind of thing which we can use. And I will have a public int year when the tweet was created. Nothing special basically. For the ID I would use the key attribute as well. The using goes there as well. And for convenience, override the toString methods in both classes. So I would do like that. Public override string toString. Just like that. And in the return we will write here that I need the ID, the content, the flagged, and the year, just like that, and we will return it. So it will have the ID, it will have the flagged, it will have the year, and the last one will be the content, because that is something long, so it should be okay at the end of the string. Good, and we will do the same for the user one as well. In the user I do not have flagged, so instead I will have the user name and I will have the user email, and the other thing should be deleted. Okay, let's see what do we have else. Add data annotation to the user class. So the created table name will be user, table's name will be users and tweets. Okay, so it's very simple. So basically we come here, we mark it that table, and it should be tweets, and we will do the same for the users until we did the using. For the users we will do the same, it will be users. We came here, add the using for it, and seems to be okay. Add the data annotation to the user class, so the user email property is required. We came here, we place here a required attribute, just like that. Okay, add data annotation to the user class, to the user email property. This is what we created. Add navigation properties to both classes to create one-to-many relation between the two. One user can have any number of tweets. Yeah, so basically it will be a one-to-many relation, and for that we have to do the following. In the user class, we have to create a collection of the tweets. So for that, in the user class, what I would like to create is a public virtual I collection, but not for the user, but for the tweet, and it will be named as tweets, just like that. And since we have this kind of collection, it could be a list, of course, but no, it couldn't be a list. Technically it could be, but it's better to have an I collection. But whenever you have this, you have to make sure that this collection is created. So basically what we have to do here is this.tweets should equal to a new hash set. And this new hash set should contain tweets, just like that. Okay, so we have the virtual I collection. We have the with I collection is the interface reference to that, but in reality it will be a hash set. And the other thing is what we have to do in the tweet class, because in the tweet class we have to set the navigation property to the user entity. So for that we will create a public virtual user type user with a get and set getter and setter, and basically that's it. It's very important to make sure that both sides has virtual, because if we are setting it to virtual, it means that we can use lazy loading when we are dealing with these objects. Technically, what else we could do here is a public virtual int user ID with a get and set, just like this. But when you read after, you can see that technically you can write it out if we really need it, but on the other hand we can get rid of it. So basically it will be just a simple navigation property, just like this, because at the background entity framework core will map together the entities correctly. Okay, so we have these sets. So basically we are here at navigation properties to both classes to create one-to-many relation. Great, so it should be okay for us. The next step will be to create the corresponding user tweet context class. So for that I'm coming here and creating a class user tweet context name. It will be public. It will be inherited from the DB context base class, which is not available for us, so we have to use or have to install some NuGet packages for that. I come here, right click on the project and select manage NuGet packages and entity framework core, just like that. So I install it again. Please make sure to remember that we are using .NET 5 version, so for that we have to make sure using the version which starts with a 5. I have to install it, accept it, and I will do the same for the others. So we will need SQL Server. Again, version is correctly selected. SQL Server is a little bit bigger, so it takes a little more time. Yes, accept it. And we can see here under dependencies and packages, we can always double check that the framework core and the core SQL Server is already installed. We then have the proxies. And then the last one will be I accept it, and the last one will be the tools, I guess, which is not yet installed. Yes. Okay, so it seems that everything from NuGet package repository. We have everything, so the core, the proxies, the SQL server, and the tools themselves. So now if I come here for DB context, I can use Entity Framework core correctly. And the next thing will be to create the DB sets. So public virtual DB set. This DB set will be for the user, so it will be users get set, and we will do the same public virtual DB set for the tweet. It will be named as tweets get set as well. Then we will have to create a constructor. This constructor does not have any input parameter. It will only create that this.users, sorry, it's not needed. It will only create that this.database .ensure created. This is the only thing which I have to call. And then what we have to do is public override void onConfiguring. This onConfiguring method should have a DB context options builder with OB set here, and it should be protected like this. And in the onConfiguring method, we are checking if OB is configured is not true. And if it's not true, we would like to do the configuration. So I will firstly have to use lazy loading proxies, and the other hand I would like to use SQL server or SQL server. And then I came here to the program.cs main section and copy the connection string. Please make sure that we are placing an @ symbol and then we are copying the connection string just like that. Okay. Last step will be here to create a protected override void onModel creating method. In the onModel creating method, we will have a model builder MB for short, and in the NB we will define the relationship between the two entities, so between the user entity and the tweet entity. In that case, I will use that the tweet entity will be our starting point, and this tweet entity will have the following. I will define that it has one user, so X user, and that one user has many, or in that case, if I continue the sentence, with many, X arrow symbol dot tweets, like that. Okay, we can leave it as is, or we can place it in new line. So basically what we are doing here is defining the relationship between the two entities. Everything which is done here can be made in the data annotation. Data annotation means that we are using attributes in the entity class. But instead we are using the fluent syntax, because fluent syntax means that basically like when you are saying an English sentence, you can write everything out like in the sentence in the code. So it means that a tweet entity has one user, and then you are continuing on that line that one user has many tweet entities. So basically it means that you are defining the connection between the two entities from both ways. So one user has many tweets and one tweet has one user, but you are not doing like I create something from the tweet and define that one tweet has one user, and then create a separate mb.entity for the user and define there that one user has many tweets. Instead, you are continuing like in the sentence that one tweet entity has one user and that one user has many tweets. So this is how you can define the relationship. And instead of writing out that so one tweet has one user, but instead of writing out that and one user has many tweets, you define simply that one user with many tweets are a relation with many tweets. So basically this is how it can be checked. On the upload.code in the repository, there is a link, an official Microsoft link here, so you can read it out for better understanding, but basically in a few sentences, this is what I would like to describe it to you. Okay, so far seems to be okay, and then what we can do here is the following: check everything if works correctly. So for that, what we can do here is user tweet context db equals new user tweet context, just like that, and then I have to create a user, new user, and then I will copy a few things here because I don't want to waste so much time on it. So basically I'm setting a username, a user email. I'm setting up the tweets for that user. For that I have to use a list, and for that list I have to use collections generic. And in the tweets I add one new tweet as well with some random content. Then what I have to do is the following: for the db.users table, I have to add this new user, which is the u, and db.save changes, because I have to save everything. Please always remember that it's not enough to do some addition or deletion, you always have to save the changes. Good, and when we have the saved changes, we would like to check if everything is correctly saved to the database. So we will go through the db.users like this, and we are writing out the item, and with an additional for each, just for quick checking, that would be, let it call tweet, which will be in the item.tweets list, and then we are writing out that the tweet. So since we implemented or override the toString, both the user item, which will be here, and both the tweet item, which is here, will be written out correctly, or at least we hope. We will see. I'm running this, and we can see here that with a 1, it means that it successfully managed to the database, because you can see here that I'm not defined the ID, because we are using the key data annotation or key attribute, automatically increments the value. So we can have the first as the first record, test user with the email address, and we can have the tweet here as well. So far so good. So basically it seems that everything is saved to the database correctly, and we are happy to hear that. So let's see. Add navigation properties are done. You create the user tweet context class, which is done. Enable lazy loading, which was just a method call after the NuGet install. Define one-to-many relationship between the two entities using Fluent API in on-model creating. That was also done. So this is the part on model creating method. We define the relationship between the two. Test the so far created functions in the main method. That is also done here. So I would like to suggest you that whenever you are doing some real exercise or some real project, this is the first step you have to create. You create all the entities, you create all the databases, and then you test it without writing any additional layering or any other stuff, so you can make sure that what you have created is ready. Okay, so the next step will be the XML processing. I opened up the XML, even though I have a small code snippet in the in the README file, I opened up the whole thing. So in that case, the XML will be a little bit complicated, because it means that the connection between the two entities, so I mean between the user and between the tweet, is also represented in the XML. It can be a JSON as well, but basically the concept would be the same, that one user entity contains its user email, username, and its user email, and it contains some kind of collection of tweet entities. So basically we have a tweets collection here, and inside the tweets, inside it we have the tweet entities, and in one tweet entity we have the content, we have the flagged value, and we have the year as well. Please note again that the ID is not written out here, because this is something which is not important for us. It's only important in the database part of the full thing. So I copy out this URL, because we will need it, and basically our task is to create a user tweet manager class which will be responsible to read the XML file provided, process it, and thus create entities. Suppose that this is an API endpoint which is called whenever the program starts, so it fetches the latest records for us. Basically it's true. So you can imagine this, that whenever this application is started, it fetches that API endpoint, which can return us back this XML, or it could be a JSON or whatever, and then we process it and we will save it to our database. It can, and between the saving, you will see that we will add a validation layer. So basically it can be accepted as a task which is automatically run and automatically validates all the records in the database. And for example, if something is not valid, then it could email us or send us some kind of notification, and so on and so on. Good. So I have to create the user tweet manager class first. Add class user tweet manager. Okay, user tweet manager, which will be responsible to read XML provided. Okay, tweet entities. Yes, create an XML reader named static method inside. So I will create a public static void XML reader inside, which will return enumerable user referenced collection. So instead of the void, I will use enumerable user, and I will write here return null just to get rid of the red arrow reference collection. Inside this method, create a func delegate which takes a string parameter. Okay, again, so I will have a string here, an enumerable user XML reader, just like that. Then instead of calling the null, I can call the XML reader, but this one, and return it, and this XML reader will have our URL as a string input parameter. Yes, and we can write the logic inside. So basically I have to create the logic, process the XML inside this delegate, and create user and tweet entities. Okay, so basically when we fetch everything, it will send us back many user entities, and between the user entities there are the tweet entities. So we have to make sure to process the XML correctly. So first thing will be to create some kind of list which will have the users. So I will create a list for the user entities. Then I will have to use for each. I will have to use a for each, but before that I will need to have an X document. For the X document I need to have the LINQ using X document, but instead of creating new X document I have to use the load function, and for that I will have the X variable, just like that. Okay, then I will create, sorry, I have the already created for each here, which will have the doc that descendants, and it will take the user descendants on it. And let's see, what do we have them? So it will be an X element, and I rename it user node because we will need an additional loop which will go through the tweets themselves. So it's better to have specific naming for the items. I can have a user u here as a new user. Then for the user email, I can have user node.element user email value assigned. I can do the same for the username. Yes, and the u.tweets should be a new list for the tweet entities, like that. And then what I have to do is create an additional for loop for additional X elements, which will be the tweet nodes, sorry, just in singular form. And the tweet node will have the value starting from the user node.elements, and these elements will be named as tweet. Yes, probably it can work out like this, but the better approach, I think, to write out fully. So write out that each user node has its element called tweets, and that element has descendants like the tweet itself. I mean only one tweet in itself. Yes, and then we can move forward with the tweet node. So basically we have to create a tweet t here, which will be a new tweet. The t dot flagged will be bool.parse, and we would like to parse the tweet node.element, but in a plural form, or sorry, singular form. So tweet node.element flagged dot value, just like that. Bool.parse needs to have this, yes, and then I will have a tweet.content, which will be the tweet node.element content.value. Yes, flagged. We will have the year as well, t.year equals. For that I will have to use int.parse. Yes, it will have the year.value. And the last thing that I have to do is u.tweets.add this new tweet entity. Correct? And after the internal for each loop, what I have to do is to the outside users list, I have to add the internal u variable, which is a reference to this newly created user. Okay, so it seems to be working, seems to be okay, but we will see if it's working correctly or not. Okay, so we create a user, set the properties, create the list itself, we iterate through the tweets with using the descendants, correct, tweet, creating the new tweet entity, setting these properties, adding the tweets, adding the user, yes, and after the external for each, what I have to do is giving us a return users, yes. And this func delegate named XML reader will be called here, passing the URL as a string here. It will process it because it's a string type, load it as the X variable in the load, but you can rename it for URL as well, and it seems to be okay, but we will see. Okay, let's see what is the next exercise. Call the delegate from the method and return the collection. Okay, testing. From the main method, process the XML file from this URL, loop through the items and write out the users and their tweets. One additional thing which can be done is that putting this variable not directly from here, but passing here it as a string URL parameter, and whenever you are calling this XML reader method, you can pass this string URL there, and then you can pass it here as well. But for us, I think it's okay currently. Okay, loop through the items and write out the users and their tweets. Okay, so basically what we have to do is use this XML reader instead of this database part. So the next step will be to have the XML reader, user tweet manager, XML reader, just like that. This XML reader will use the func delegate, will process the XML and will return us back one list of users, and those users have their dedicated list for the tweets. So we can write out the item here, and we can loop through the items and write out the tweets as well. So if we hit F5 and start praying, we can hope for the best. Seems to be okay. Great. Vody watermelon mir with an email address. We can have the flagged variables, and this is why I left the content at the end, because then it doesn't make a big problem for us. Yeah, it seems to be okay. Again, we can see the zeros because it's not yet stored in the database, so everything seems to be okay. So the testing loop through is ready until so far. The next thing will be the attribute usage. Create a class name contains character attribute. So nothing else to do. Create a new class contains character attribute. And what we would like to do is also we would like to use some kind of validation, but what we want to check is if any user has an email address which is correct in terms of our needs, and we would like to validate these email addresses. If it's correct, it's okay, it can be saved to the database. If it's not correct, it won't be saved to the database, but this logic basically can be used for some additional things. So for example, whenever you run this small program, it fetches the data from some API endpoint, which can be basically an external database, validates all the records, all the usernames, all the user emails, and if some email is not valid, then for example it can send you an email, or it can log it to somewhere else, or any additional things. Okay, contains character attribute. So inside what we have to do is, firstly, again, it writes out for us that, where is it? Attribute usage. Define a constructor. Okay, restricted. So attribute can be placed on properties only. So again, we will have to use attribute usage, attribute targets.property. What is the problem? The problem is that it's not yet inherited from the base attribute class. We will have to create a string property characters to be checked. So basically what we will create here is very simple, to be checked, and then I will write here. Basically what we will create is a string, which basically a character array, and instead of writing string here, we simply can have a characters array here, but in terms of undergoing procedure, everything would remain the same. So that is why I write out string, and it says that apply the attribute to the users, use the linear property, and add @ symbol and dot symbol as characters. So user email. I'm coming here. And what was that? Contains character attribute. Again, we can write out attribute, but it's not necessary. And I will write out these two symbols. So basically it means that I can add as many symbols or characters as I would like to do, and our validation class will validate every email address which is scanned through by these characters. So for example, if I would like to create a system where all the emails should have at least an @ symbol to make sure that it is a valid email address, and again it should have, for example, one dot because something.com, something.hu, something.net, and so on and so on. I can add these symbols here. But for example, if I want to make sure that there are at least 2 dots, I can write 2 dots here. But I don't think that would turn out well, but you get the idea. So basically we applied the attribute as well. The next step will be to add the validation using reflection. So for that we have to create a class named validator, add class validator, and in the validator class, user email validator name static method, public static void user email validator name static method, which returns a boolean value and takes 2 parameters: string property name t generic object. String property name t generic object. In order to have t as a input parameter, we have to mark the method as generic for t type, and it should return us a bool variable or bool type. Inside the method, create a func delegate again. So we have to create an additional func delegate here, but I will create this method without the func delegate, and then we will wrap it inside a func delegate. So you will see how easy it's in reality to use the func delegate. As you can see, the func delegate is taking a string at the t parameter input parameter and returns a boolean as well. So basically it will be doing the same in terms of parametering. Inside this func delegate, create an algorithm that can validate the given object by the given property and by the contains character attribute applied on it. Check which characters are available through the attribute and check if all of them is contained in the property itself. So you can see here that, for example, test email at something.com is a valid email address because it has both characters inside. Test email underscore something.com is invalid because it's missing the @ symbol, and the other way around, test email at something underscore com is invalid because it's missing the dot character. And then we will call the delegate from the method and return the output. So what we have to do is the following. Again, we will have to use reflection, and for that we will need that the generic object .get type will return us back the type of it. If you remember, in the previous exercise we used the type of for the t, which is basically, in terms of technicality, it is the same, so it will return us back the type. But in this case we will use the generic object .get type .get property. We can use the get properties as I already discussed in the previous video, but we will simply use the get property and we will get it by the property name itself, just like that. No, I don't need that. And we will store it as a property info property, just like that. For the property info, we will need to use system.reflection using. Yes, we have the property. We have to have the contains character attribute, which is CCA for short. And for the property, which we already established, that get custom attributes in this form will have the type of for the contains character attribute, and we will use comma true, I guess, but we will see. Comma false, I'm sorry. Comma false. Yes, it will return us back a lot of things because we are using the get custom attributes, so in plural form. For that, we will need to use a first or default call. And what we can do is either have a casting here at the beginning, this is one way, or the other way is to have it an as casting, just like that. Both of them is acceptable, basically. So I will do it like this. So we have the custom attribute as well, and the next step will be to create or to find out what is the property, is context or content, property content. In that we will use the property that get value. Whenever you would like to get the data using reflection of an object's property, you have to make sure that you call the get value with the object passed as the parameter. If you think about it, there is no possibility to get the value of an object without knowing the object. So to get the list of the properties, the list of the methods, simply the type of the object is enough for you, but to get the actual value of that property or of that method or something else, you have to include the object itself, because only the object which is already created can have or can hold the value itself. So get value, and for that we will call the toString as well, because we know that that property will be a string value, and we will simply use a for each, and this for each will iterate through in the already established contains character attribute dot and characters to be checked, and it will return us back in that case the @ symbol and the dot symbol, just like that. So we will have character, yes, and I will check with an if statement that if property content that contains character. So basically I'm checking if the property content doesn't contain the character which is needed for us, the @ symbol and the dot symbol, then it will return us back false, otherwise it will return us back true. Please make sure that this return true is outside the for each statement for a reason. Okay, so basically if I have so many characters listed here like these, every character should have only one, and I'm removing these. So whenever it's checking for the first character, which is the @ symbol, if the @ symbol is not contained inside the properties content itself, so is not in the email address, then I am immediately returning false, because even if one symbol is not inside the string, then I don't consider it as a valid email address. So this is why I'm returning immediately false here. Okay, so basically this is the thing. Good. Seems to be okay, but we cannot make sure until we check it. Good. For the moment, I will test it from the main method, because that is the first thing I think which is set here. that loop through the elements and validate all of them using the user email validator. If the user's email was valid, save it to the database, otherwise write out to the console that the user was not fulfilled the requirements. Yes, and then we will loop through the items in order to see that everything which was valid is saved to the database. So firstly, we will do this part of the job, and if it's worked correctly, then we will come back and wrap everything inside the func delegate. So I coming here and XML reader. So I will have this part, I delete this, XML reader, v toolist. For the toolist, we will need to use using for system.linq, and I will have a list of users with the user's reference here. Good. And what I would like to do is firstly validate everything. So I will use a for each in the users. I will have a user item here. Okay, and what I would like to do is the validator. So validator dot user email validator. And again, what I can do here is defining the string property name as a string, writing out in quote marks, or what we can do is using the name of, which is a better approach, user dot user email, and the generic object will be the user itself. This validator dot user email validator will return us back either a true or either a false, so we can write out those firstly, just to see, to get a feeling that everything is working correctly. So we can see that true, true, false, true, true, true. It's okay, it seems to be okay, because there is only one email address which is not fulfilling the requirements. If we see there is only one thing, it can have at symbol, dot symbol, and there is only one thing, this one, sourcera@hotmail.net. This is the only one which does not have the correct symbols inside. So the output seems to be okay. Okay, so without continuing with this step, I'm going back to the validator and wrap everything in a func delegate, so we can see what is the difference. So basically everything which is written here is, I simply create a func delegate here. It will have a string property, it will have a t property, and it will return us back a bool type. I will name it as validate. Since I have two inputs, I must use braces, I guess. So one will be the prop name and one will be the object, and then what I will do is to create the curly braces. It's saying that not all code paths return a value, and what I will do is copy everything and simply paste inside. Okay, so it returns a true or returns a false in these cases. The problem here is that it's using the property name and it's using the generic object. So instead of using the generic object, what we have to do is use the input parameter, so the underscore object, and instead of using the property name, we have to use the underscore prop name, just like that. And in that case, this func delegate should work correctly because it's returning everything which is needed. And the only thing which we have to do is call return validate. and this return validate will have the property name and the generic object, which is the method parameters at the top. So it seems to be okay, or we hope so. So let's run again the program without doing any modifications. We only wrapped everything in a func delegate, and we can see that the same output is available. Okay, it's okay. It's okay. And then we can move back to the real exercise, which told us that loop through the elements, validate all of them using the user email validator. If the user email was valid, save it to the database. So we have to modify this for each loop accordingly. So instead of writing out to the console, what I would like to do, if validator user email validator seems to be working, then I add it to the database. Else, what I would like to do is writing out the user email is not fulfilling the requirements. Rex for short. Okay, constant write line out, yes, and if everything is okay, we would like to save the changes. Then something happens, and then we would like to check if everything in the database is stored correctly. So if we would like to get the db.users, we will use the user and write line out the user itself, and then we will use an additional for each, which will be the tweet, which will have the user.tweets collection, and for that we will write down the tweet dot. Content could be good, but we can write out everything basically. It won't look good, but seems to be okay for testing. So you can see here that only one thing, source area at hotmail.net, is not fulfilling the requirements. Otherwise, all the items are saved correctly to the database. You can see that the IDs are incremented correctly, both in the users and both in the tweets as well. And all the other things are going to be okay as far as I can see. Okay, so basically, so far we are doing fine. The testing is made. So testing is done. We are looping through the elements from the database and write out user and tweets. So it seems to be okay. The next part will be this big part about data querying using LINQ. So for that, we will use a user tweet manager class, which is already created. And we have to use the following methods to create the LINQ queries with query syntax inside them. There is a small remark that all methods should use a database as the source, so all of them will have the user tweet context as a parameter. And what these methods should return is, for the moment, for just practice purposes, because we would like to practice the LINQ part of the subject, not how to create objects or classes. It's enough if we return in all cases an enumerable reference for object types. But in real world, in real application, it's not good, because then you lose type. You lose the ability to have and to create types. So that is something we should avoid in real applications. In real applications, instead of returning objects, you have to create a dedicated entity or dedicated DTO classes for those purposes, and don't be afraid that, oh my god, I have to create 10 additional classes. Yes, you have to create 10 additional classes. This is completely okay and completely normal. Okay, so in the user tweet manager, and I will do a trick here, because I will Okay, it's not working as I expected. So instead, what I can do is drag this here, because I want to see both the program.cs part and I would like to see the user tweet manager part. So this is the XML reader, and beneath it or under it, I would like to create the additional LINQ stuff. So I would like to create a method which will be a public static enumerable object returning called get users with Hotmail account. So the first task will be, and we will have the db, what was the name? User tweet context, and I will call it db as database, and it will return us back null in that case. Okay, so basically what we will do is using the database and querying all the items in the database, select every account which has a Hotmail account. So for example, when we would like to filter out which Hotmail accounts are registered in our system, this is something what we can do. So what we will do is var q, and from x in db.users select x, and we would like to select x whenever the x.email, I mean user email, get users with Hotmail account, x.email contains Hotmail part in it. Yes, and not only we would like to select the full objects, we would like to select the user names. So I will have user name here, and what we would like to do is convert them to uppercase characters, so in uppercase format. So what we will need to do is username.toUpper, like this, and we can return the Q, which will be an enumerable reference something. In order to see what is going on, what we can do is place a breakpoint here, and here we would like to call user tweet manager dot get users with Hotmail account, just like that. So basically we will call the method and we will stop here to see what is going on. Let's see. I have the breakpoint here, and we have these two records. These two records have Hotmail in their account, so it seems to be okay. Okay, then we can remove the breakpoint and go on to the next exercise, which is get users with at least one old tweet. Okay, so what I will do to speed up the process, copy this, everything. So in terms of return and in terms of input parameter will remain the same. And what I would like to do is get the users with at least one old tweet. One old tweet would mean us that tweet is before 2010, but it can be defined anyhow. But the key point is that we have something to filter around. Okay, so let's see how it will turn out. That get users with at least one old tweet. So it's very tricky because you immediately think that you have to use db.users, and by the users you have to find out somehow that when the tweet was created. But it's not really the case, because the other way around, you can simply use the tweets table as well, and by starting from the tweet itself, you have the navigation properties set, so you have the reference set to the object of the user, so you can go the other way around by starting from the tweets. So from x in db.tweets, where x.year is smaller than 2010, we can select the x.user, and it will return us back the full user object. Okay, it won't be good so far, because if we read the program, read the exam, select the users without duplicate records. So it means that when we have this here and we call the get users with at least one old tweet, we will immediately see that there are multiplications, or there are duplications inside. So you can see here that record 1 and 4 seems to be okay, but this record is a duplicate record because it has 2 tweets at least, which is before 2010. So we somehow get rid of the duplicates, and for that we can simply use a very easy trick here. This LINQ can be wrapped in a distinct method call, which will get rid of the duplicates, I'm sorry. So if we run it again, you can see that this queue now have only the 1, the 4, and previously we had the double 5 records, but we now only have 1 5 record. Okay. Auto hide. Great. The next task will be, where should I look? Get users with tweet count. Again, I would like to copy this. Get users with tweet count. Yep. Okay, so the get users with tweet count. Count how many tweets each user have and return them back in an anonymous class containing the username and the tweet count properties. So count how many tweets. Okay, let's count how many tweets do we have. So in that case, we use from x in db.users. It's very simple. Select new. And in the select new, I have to use the username, which will be the x.username. It's not problematic. And the tweet count will be very easy, because I simply have to use the x.tweets.count. Correct. Count how many tweets each user have. Yes, correct. Seems to be okay. Let's see, it will something count at the end, get users with tweet count. Okay, run it and see it. Queue, results, view, username, and we can see the tweet counts displayed correctly. So, for example, by that, we can rank the users in our system who has the most tweet counts or whatever. Average tweet by length by flag. Okay, let's see. Okay, get users with tweet count. Calculate what is the average length of the tweets for the flagged ones and non-flagged ones. The flagged status can be grouped. Use anonymous class with is flagged and average length properties. So calculate what is the average length of the tweets in both groups, in the flagged group and in the non-flagged group. So basically, we have to use group X. Yes, group X by x.flagged. No, we have to use average tweet length. Yeah, we have to use it from the tweets. So group X by x.flagged into G, or it could be any name, and is flagged and average length. So is flagged is going to be the G.key, and the average length should be an average calculation. So basically the G.average, and for the average we will use a dot content dot length. Yes, and we are returning it. Okay, we are copying it, and let's see if it's working correctly. Return Q, we have the breakpoint results view, and is flagged true, is flagged false. So we can see that there is a distinct grouping between the false and the true, and we can have some kind of average value if we would like to check it. We can check it, but it seems to be okay. Okay, we have the by flag created, sum of tweet years by flag. I copy it here firstly, and then I copy the method, then I copy the name. Yep, and then we are removing back so far. So sum of tweet years by flag, sum up the year, or sum the year of the tweets in the flagged and non-flagged group, use anonymous class. So basically it's very similar like we did previously. So from X in db.tweets, yes, it should be, yes. Then we will say group X by X.flagged into, yes, select new, and is flagged equals g.key, and some years will be g.sum as arrow as dot year. We would like to sum together all the years, so basically I hope it will work out correctly. Average tweet length, yes. What was sum of? We can run it and see what will be the end. Return Q, breakpoint is flagged false true, and we can see that some years are some kind of different, so it seems to be okay. Okay, remove the breakpoint, copy this one below, and we have the last query, which will be get tweet number for mail type. So in this exercise, count how many tweets are created for each mail type. By mail type, we mean the domain endings in the user's email, like .something.com or .something, or .hotmail.net. So basically, what we would like to do is create a grouping based on what is the ending of the email, and this is something we would like to create dynamically in one query. So from X in db.users, and again this one will be a tricky, we will see later, group X by, and now I have to define what is the logic by I would like to do the grouping. So the exercise says that group them by the mail type. So basically I have the full email address and I have to split it somehow at the @ symbol and check the second part of this splitting. So it's very simple, like in programming 1. X.user email dot split. We will split by this, and we will use not the 0 but the first part of that, and we will place it into G, and we would like to select a new, and we would like to it doesn't say what properties should be used, but it will be a mail type for the G.key, and it will be a tweet count, which will be a G.sum, where the hash.tweets should be counted. And this seems to be simple. But what is the problem? We can see here that it's going it is giving us some error explaining what is the problem, but basically what it is giving us, it's not the real problem. So somehow it's not going to understand our splitting procedure here. What we can do as a workaround is not using splitting, but using this logic instead. x.useremail.substring, and then I dynamically check for the at symbol using the index of function. So let's see how else is this alternative option turning out. If I place it here, it seems to be working correctly, because at least now we can run the program. So let's run it. And this method will be get tweet number for mail type. Okay, so I have the method. Let's run it and let's see what is the problem. The problem in the results view will be the same as it was in the demo exam 1. That, as you can see, either rewrite the query or in a form that can be translated, or switch to client evaluation explicitly by inserting a call to as enumerable, as async enumerable, to list async, and so on and so on. So basically it says that the problem is that we would like to create so complex thing which cannot be translated into the SQL syntax form, which the entity framework core can evaluate on the database, and that is the problem. By this moment, what the IDE sees is a technically correct LINQ, but it doesn't give us a red error because it's too complex that the IntelliSense is not able to identify if it's working or not. But for example, if we use the other version, which is the split, in terms of splitting, I think maybe it's easier for the IntelliSense to identify if it's going to be okay or not, so it immediately can warn us that this is not going to be okay. So what we can do as an alternate option is to call a toList here as well. If we're calling the toList, this immediately is resolved, I mean the problem, and when we run the program again, we can see that the concept, how we would like to solve this problem in terms of user email splitting and so on, is going to be okay, because then we can immediately see that from each email type we have exactly the right number of the items. Which is true because in the XML everything is a valid email except one. So basically only one item is not going to saved in the database, because in the database only the validated users are saved. So if someone doesn't have a valid email address, which as we see previously is not going to be stored in the database, and since these queries are using the database, then the not valid item is not inside the database. So again, we have a problem which we could technically solve, but in terms of functionality, this is, I would say, a workaround for the problem, which is the current state. Okay, but at least we can say that we know how to have the workaround for that. Okay, what we have moreover is the following. Create a custom extension method to process the LINQ query's output, create a class named operations, and inside the generic method named toConsole. Call the methods from the main method and use the toConsole method to display the results of the console. Okay, so the next thing what we can do is great that I have the LINQ queries here, but I would like to somehow display these at the console. So I will have a new class here called operations. In the operations, I simply move it here. in the operations, I will have a generic method named toConsole. Public void toConsole method, just like that. And it will be an extension method when So it will be an extension method when I am able to call the method by simply writing here that toConsole. But as you can see, it's not yet visible neither in the IntelliSense small window as well. So somehow there should be a trickery for that. In order to do it, I have to do a public toConsole, and what I have to write here is very simple. This dot IEnumerable for the T type. Since the T type is not available here, I have to mark the method with the generic T type like this. This will be the input, and I will have a string header. This second part is optional. It's not really needed to be the extension method, only this part, especially the this keyword is very important. In order to call them without any problems, I mark both the class and both the method as static. And what I write here is very simple. I will copy it for easier access. So I will write out something with the header, also write out something with the header, and inside I will simply iterate through on the input collection, which is IEnumerable for T type, and simply write out all the item inside. And it will be very easy because, as you can see, I can come here and write out toConsole with everything, and you can see that all the problems are going away. Q3, Q4, Q5, Q6. So I had 6 queries, and when I run them, you can see, hopefully, that all the queries are displayed correctly, and all the LINQ outputs are visible in the console, and you can see that every header is displayed as well as a small wrapper on the top and in the bottom of the query. So basically this is how we can use it, and this is called an extension method. So it's very comfortable because then you can use it as dot something. You do not have to write out separately console.writeLine, or you do not have to create additional for eaches in all the things. So it's a better way to process these items. Great. So we have the custom extension method class, custom extension method. We have them in usage in the main part of the exercise. And then one thing that we can do is the final thing as well, is the unit testing for the LINQ queries. So basically we can consider that everything in the user tweet manager, which we've done in these methods, is basically just like a logic in a multi-layer application or a business logic. So we can have unit tests based on them. So what we would like to do, right click on the solution, add the new project. That will be a class library. That will be logic testing, or it could be LINQ testing. .NET 5 seems to be okay. We can rename the class tests. Yes, you would like to rename this one as well. And for testing purposes, we have to add some nuggets, which will be an unit itself. Then we will have the NUnit3 test adapter as well. Yes, installed, and test SDK will be the final Microsoft.NET.test SDK. In the meantime, we can open in the testing to see all the packages are loaded or not. Yes, I accepted it as well, and then I have all the 3 things appear there. So in the testing, what I can do is mark test fixture. And for that I can use the NUnit framework. Then inside I can have a test, and I will have public void something. And I can call the text explorer to see if everything is identified in the tests or not. Okay, so again we can see that how it's discovering the tests. Again, it is using a reflection. I already discussed it more deeply in the ADT demo exam 1 video, so you can go there and check it out. Okay, so create a separate DLL to handle unit testing. So if it's not straightforward, when we edit class library, it basically can be understood as creating a separate DLL. Handle unit testing, named testing for the project, and LINQ tests for the class. I unfortunately switched it, so LINQ testing is the project name, but it's not the biggest problem in this case. But in the exercise, always rename everything as it should be. So create an init method which will run exactly one time before all the tests to initialize the starting state. Okay, to do that, what we can do is basically create a setup method. So it will be public void init, and in this init method what I will do is basically, that's all that I will have inside the class, a private user tweet context type. For that type I have to add a reference to the project, and that will be named as database. I will have a getter setter for that. It should be private because it will be only used inside the tests class for the moment. What I will do here in the init is to this.db equals a new user tweet context, and I will populate this db here. So I will create a list of users called users, and I will call the user tweet manager .xml reader .toList. So in that case, for the toList I need using system LINQ. So in that case, basically, what is the problem? Call action generic is needed as well. So this is all using what we have so far. So basically what I am doing is creating a user tweet context because I would like to use database related entities. In other projects, maybe it's not the best way. It's a better way to have the data layer, have the repository layer, have the logic layer. If you would like to test the logic, you have to mock the database layer or the repository layer, sorry. So in that case, in real project, that is the best way, but for us, currently we would like to practice only unit testing, so this is going to be okay for us. So I have the user tweet context, I have a list of users, and I would like to create a for each, which going through the users, and each user should be validated. So we are checking if validator that is valid. User email validator instead, sorry. And again, I can copy everything here just like that. So we have if the validator user email validator for the user email for the given user in the users array is valid, then it is added to the database to the users table. Very easy. And if we are done that, the db.save changes is very important, otherwise we won't have the records in our database. So this is the init, which is going to be run before all the tests at once. Great. And the only thing which we need to have available in the full class is only this user tweet context db. Great. So so far so good. The next thing what we can do is the following method. So instead of naming something, we name it test get users with Hotmail account underscore from DB returns to. So there are many naming conventions. Some say that every test method should start or should end with a test, postfix or prefix. But one important here is that the test method name contains the method name which we would like to test, and also we can define something else, basically something that returns true, returns false, or returns correct number, or returns exception, and so on and so on. So the key concept here is that by reading just only the test name, we should get a good feeling about what is this test about. So I think it should be okay. We will have a result variable. For that, we will have the user tweet manager get users with Hotmail account. This is what we would like to do, and we pass the DB tweet. I shrink this a little bit more. Okay, so it's passing the DB, which is available in the class itself, so it's not a surprise. And the result, we can assert the result. We can assert that result dot count is equal to, and we can place the number here with 2, because we know that in our database, or if we are mocking the database or the repository layer, we should know that in our mocked database there are only 2 records which are corresponding to our logic, which is selecting how many Hotmail accounts are in the system, so we can run it. And let's see how it's going to be. It failed, so something is not going to be okay. I enlarge this window because it seems to be that some problem with the XML reader, so it cannot reach maybe the URL. I run it again, maybe. Yes, so the problem was that with the server, which is going to fetch the data from this URL. Maybe it wasn't available for a moment, I don't know, it can happen. But we can see here that it's working correctly. I run it again just to make sure. I haven't changed anything on the test, so you can see here that basically, again, we have the same problem. Okay, now we are going to have some additional problem because it's expecting 2, but it was 4. So basically it means that the database, the MDF file was not copied to the new place. We will run it again. Maybe if it was 6, then that should be the problem. That is the problem. So the database is not removing or not refreshing by default. So what I try to do is to delete all the MDF and LDF files, because somehow it seems that when we are doing these kind of tests, the content copy always for the MDF and LDF files are not working correctly or not working as expected, and thus that is the problem, that whenever I'm running this over and over again, all the records are added to the database again and again and again. So there is this problem. This can be solved 2 ways. The first way is you get rid of this whole thing and create a mock database, which is the best way, but unfortunately at the moment this is not the aim of the practice. The other way is that whenever we are initting this test, we can create here delete all records from the DB query. So that is another way. When I run it first, you can see that since we are having 2 Hotmail accounts, it's going to equal to 2, so it's worked correctly. We can see that this is how it works. I will start moving to the next test and basically get used to it. Okay, so create an init method exactly one time, record database after validation, just like it was main function. Correct, that is Chris. That is ready. Create a test name with this name, which will check if the get users method returns exactly 2 records. It is technically working, but in reality, not really, because of the duplicate records. Create a test name, or the other way you can do, sorry, I forgot to mention, is that go for the build and clean solution, will get rid of the MDF and the LDF files, as far as I can see. And the second one, create a test named get users with at least one old tweet, returns without duplicates. And for that, I would like to use test as well, public void. I should shrink it a little bit. Public void, this will be the name. And here, what I would like to do is returns without duplicates, yes. So var result equals user tweet manager, get users with at least one old tweet, passing the DB as the parameter, and we would like to assert that the result.count is point equal to abnormal equal to so the correct number, which should be 3. So if we run this test only, it should be green. And what we can do, just for practice, we give it here as a variable int correct number, and we will use this correct number as the input parameter. I'm afraid if I run this again, it will give me the same problem, but basically the same should happen. No, it worked correctly. Get users with at least one OT. Get users with Hotmail account. Should I run it again? Just to see. Okay, that was the problem previously. Okay, so we already finished. Just for clarification, after creating the user tweet context, I simply place 2 for each loops. One goes through all the tweets, one goes through all the users, and simply removes everything and saves it. So basically, now if I run the test multiple times, we can see that we always receive a green test. So basically that was the problem, that somehow on this machine the MDF and the LDF items are get stuck. Unfortunately, it happened me a few times. It somehow depends on the machine. I don't know, I don't have any idea otherwise, but we can have these kind of workarounds. So in that case, I'm sure that everything will be removed from the database, and then I can populate everything freshly into the database. Okay, so basically that is that was the last step. To method returns exactly 3 records. For this, use a test case with the value 3 and check via the variable, which we did here. Okay, so basically in this exercise we went through everything. The main importance here was the database creation, because now we had 2 entities, which 2 entities had a connection or a relation between them. In this case, it was a one-to-many relation, because one user entity could have many tweet entities, and the other way around, one tweet entity had at least one user entity. Sorry, not at least, exactly one user entity. The same structure or the same relationship visible in the XML structure as well. So one user has the properties and has a tweets collection which contains dedicated tweet objects. Okay, so we use the XML reader method to process the XMLs. It was very similar like we did in the ADT exam demo exam 1. So basically that was it. The key advantage or the key difference was that we have to have an additional internal for each for the tweet nodes in the XML as well to process them. We use again a func delegate, which in the other part, which was user tweet context, which was in the validator. Yeah, which was in the validator as well. So we previously created this internal logic and then we wrapped everything into the func delegate, and we saw that there is no much problem with it. We tested so far everything from the main, then we created custom attributes, we applied them. In that case, this attribute was some kind of email address validation, if it's seems to be a real email address or not. And after that, we basically created the validation using reflection, tested for the properties, tested from the main function, and the validation here had a more significant role, because if an item is valid in terms of validation principles, it could be saved to the database, otherwise not. Then we had a few LINQ querying stuff which was performed on the database itself. We created a extension method for the LINQ queries, so we can simply type that to console and it automatically writes everything out to the console. And then we created a few unit testing for the LINQ queries. And basically that's it. So guys, thanks again for your attention. I hope you find this example or exercise a bit more challenging in terms of difficulty. And that's all for this video. If you have any question, you can find me in many platforms and in many ways. Thanks for your attention again. Bye bye.